I'm willing to step into a new way of being. I'm willing to step into another way of seeing, right? And of being with myself and therefore with the kids. Like it all starts with our internal relationship. And that's really all that we're doing, is modeling for that for children.
This is the Beware How show. Mystic philosophy made practical. There are many paths up the mountain, and we're just pointing at a few of them. I'm Bob Peck, speaking with Scott Stanley, Ryan Paget, and Melina Kyriaki. We are conscious creatives and formerly closeted mystics trying to unpack the inaccessible. According to the mystics, the truth cannot be spoken, but we'll try to talk about it anyway.
Today is Monday, October 19th, and our guest is Heather Hawk Feinberg. Welcome, Heather. So glad to have you on.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor.
So glad to have you. I'm gonna read your bio here and we'll jump right in. Heather Feinberg has a BA in Anthropology and an MA in Counseling and Human Services from the University of Colorado. She held a license as a professional counselor in the state of Colorado, and she trained extensively at the Interconnection Institute in Denver, Colorado, and is a student of A Course in Miracles. Above all else, Heather is here to learn, and this is how she loves to learn. Heather is the founder of Mindful Kids, a nonprofit organization that creates pioneering resources for social and emotional learning. Heather offers individual, couples, and family spiritual counseling. Her work is featured in the children's magazine Root and Star, and her debut children's book, Crying is Like the Rain, A Story of Mindfulness and Feelings, was published this year, September 2020, from Tilbury House. She lives in Austin, Texas with her husband and daughter, where you can find her dreaming up her next children's book and sitting by the water. Beautiful imagery. Awesome. We can all relate. I would just say my informal intro is Melina and I know Heather through synchronous reasons, but mainly because we are building a mindfulness curriculum for children through our Mindfulness Club at Facebook. We're working on an outreach project, particularly focusing on marginalized communities, but really kids as a whole. And Heather has been a huge mentor for us. We spent the last few months preparing, learning from her and a few others. But really mainly Heather. So again, thank you for being here. Definitely want to jump into your work. Mindfulness and children and education, I think is just so important, so interesting. It's something that, we all have a shared passion for. But before we do that, give us some background, some personal and early professional background.
Yeah, so thank you for all of that.
Sure, I could keep going. Never start the show. It's just context.
It's really, to me, this is like such a pleasure. So when I was thinking about, you were like, okay, we'll talk about background first. And I was like, sure. Where do we, hold on. Where do we go here? But honestly, what I really want to say when I really sit in my heart is that I feel like I've always been a seeker, and I feel like I've always been a pioneer in a lot of ways. And I've always longed to really bring life to life, and so even as a young child, I feel like that was what I embodied. And I went through a lot of things at a young age that were pretty trauma filled. And that, you stumble and you fall and you figure out how to get back up, and then it informs you. I'm saying me, I'm saying you, but I mean me. I mean us, the collective us.
Sure. Trauma as a vehicle.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, I'm speaking for all of us. And totally. and then you find your way, and then it informs who you are. I think, so when I was 9 years old, my father passed away in sort of like a freak bicycle accident.
Oh my gosh.
And
That's a
and
very
that,
early age.
yeah, it was an early age. And
Mhm.
and just that one incident, if there were nothing else, but if, you know, if there were just that one incident, just that one incident itself has informed so much of my work really with children, because it's my work with my inner 9-year-old, right? Or then 10
Sure.
and 11 and 12, you know, and just that one, that when I think back on it, that one singular incident for me really catapulted, really strengthened, really embedded in me my initial connection to spirit, to energy, to life with a capital L, to that which is not of the physical, but of something more than that. Just that at a young age, I had a loss that was profound, and I had to fill that hole with something, right? And so as a young girl, I filled it with spirit, with life, with the energy of life, right? And so I was able to, I had to, that was my survival, right? I had to make sense of it. So I made sense of it by saying, I know what's real. I know I can still feel him. I know he still speaks to me. I know that he still informs me. I know he opens doors for me. I know he, you know, on and on, right? And so that was my initial, and of course none of this was like conscious, you know, I mean, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't like I set
Sure.
out to say, here's a good thing to do. I mean, obviously, you know, but that's how I made sense of that loss.
That's
And
so beautiful. Thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah, I know. I was.
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
You've
for
already
sharing
touched my
that.
heart, and we're like 3 minutes into an hour. 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think that really started my journey and my drive to why I do so much of the work that I do, and why I think it's so important, because all kids, I mean, I hope they don't go through that, but they all go through, all of us as children and all children go through trauma. They go, you know, they go through hard things. That's what life is for in a lot of ways. We could debate that topic, but anyway, that's another topic.
You're good.
So what I think is so important about when I think about reaching children is that what we've had to learn through our survival can be something that enlivens us and that informs our life. And so, and as it has been for me. And so I share that about my background because it's so important to me to recognize that we're all suffering. We all have suffered and we all will suffer. And there's life, and there's something that is innate and pure and inherent in every cell of our being that is united with every cell of everyone else's being. And that the more that we can share with our children these truths from a young age and help them to really make them conscious, the more we really teach them about like the truth of with a capital T. So
Well
I kind of
said.
got off topic with
No,
my
so true.
background,
That's beautiful. Thank you so
So
much for sharing
beautiful.
that.
Yeah.
The mystics have trouble with the linearity background question. We've talked about this before because several guests have been like, I don't really want to give you like a plot point A, B, C thing. I don't understand that,
Right.
format really.
That's so true.
You set out the episode, I think, in a perfect way in that, coming from your heart, but also setting that intention that this is something that you went through and it helped transform you to who you are, and to give back to children that might not know this, and kind of in this agenda here, which we want to talk about your book and your work and some of your kind of processes, but why Melina is so, I won't speak too much on her behalf, but she's interested in, if I only knew this when I was a kid. I think a lot of kids don't have this kind of spiritual, psychological equipment or frameworks of understanding some of these ideas that it's a very important and noble ambition to try to get it in front of as many kids as we can.
Totally. And I feel the exact same way as Melina, and that's why I created it, because when I had my daughter and I saw, myself in her, right, from every age, and thought, how do I give myself in the form of my daughter, along with my inner child, right? Because it like happens at the same time. That's like the intergenerational healing. How do I give myself what I didn't have? How do I use the opportunity of motherhood to inform and heal the parts of me that are still dangling out there in the middle of the ether, never having been really claimed and loved and embraced and acknowledged through this little adorable thing,
angel.
Right. Sometimes she's 9 now, but
same, feel the same way about my 8-month-old. So
totally, that part does not change.
It's a duality.
Exactly, totally. But yeah, so I mean, so every step of the way, and I shared with you guys on one of our calls, like, even when I was writing the book, and when I write any of the meditations that I write for the kids, or for any of the projects that I work on, I tell myself when I'm doing it that it's for this, that's for this child, or for this like topic, that sort of thing. But in the end, it's informing me, it's healing me.
Yeah.
I'm speaking to myself. I can only see me. You know what I mean? Like in both the small and the large, I'm only seeing me. And so that's the kind of the beautiful and the, I don't know, mysterious and ethereal kind of thing. But I did it, so it's, and not in a selfish way, in like an expansive way, you know what I mean? In the way of like, I'm willing to do this work for myself and share it. I'm willing to be seen. I'm willing to be, vulnerable in that way, because I'm saying what I need for myself, and I'm letting someone else hear it. And so I think that's brave in some ways, although I don't usually tell myself that, but
yeah, totally. It's reciprocal. What you're putting out there is coming right back at you from the way these kids are, understanding and working with this material. And it's I'm excited to get into that sector of education, because I think my stuff, and I don't want to dominate this conversation. I want everybody to share, but I feel like typically my education piece is mostly for adults, and it's mostly for the conceptual and the philosophical, and like what these brilliant minds that I work with do is they help me make it more approachable and digestible and less lofty, dusty textbook stuff, which I dig. I'm really into that, but the comparative stuff. But there's a real beauty in the practical, and there's a real beauty in even just generational.
And intergenerational. That seems incredibly important. Hearing you talk about it sounds like almost like a necessity, because we hear so much about the opposite of like intergenerational trauma and like problems that get passed down, by parents. And it to my mind, it seems like this is maybe the only way to like undo all of that scarring.
Let's dive in. I mean, kind of what I wrote about the preface to your work was the book title itself. I mean, your book is a nice window, I think, into what you do, because the book's called Crying is Like Rain, is like the rain. I told a friend that, essentially what you do is you're integrating these contemplative practices into the world of children with very rich imagery, particularly nature kind of symbolism that is understandable to them. Has kind of Buddhist flavors. Thich Nhat Hanh is all about kind of nature metaphors to communicate these ideas, and just making it easier for them to cognize. And so even just the title itself is doing that. And the theme throughout the book, because I've read it and it's very good. I have a couple of reviews here that I'd like to read, but that, the whole process is the symbolism of the weather connoting to our thoughts and our feelings, and being able to notice them as though we're noticing weather, I think has a lot of value. And I think that really colors a lot of what you do in your, education sessions with one-on-one, but you also do with a ton of groups of kids. And I thought that was a nice way in.
Yeah, That's awesome. Yeah. What did I want to say about that? I love the idea. Oh, I was at the start. I was thinking I was going to tell you a story about when I was 21 years old and I just graduated from college, and I was with my then boyfriend and another couple, and we were out to dinner. And I had been thinking in the last, within a 6-month period, there were these ideas that were coming to me. And I had this idea that I wanted to write a children's book. And the idea of the book was that you could learn everything about life that you needed to know through nature. So at the time I was thinking about, butterflies and, the normal, those kinds, that just,
chrysalis to butterfly.
Yeah. That kind of thing. And trees and leaves and, whatever.
Right.
The kind of, the stuff that you would, that a 21-year-old graduating from college in Boulder, Colorado, who studied anthropology would be thinking about, and so, and it's so funny because I had that. I mean, we were sitting out to dinner, and I remember telling my friend, because she was like, what are you going to do now that you graduated from college? And so I feel at the time I felt like I had to had something to say, have some I just graduated from college. I have some idea of what it is that I'm going to do in the world, And so I was like, I'm going to write children's books. And she was like, oh, she had known me for a few years. I'd never mentioned it. And she's like,
surprise.
And she was like, and she was like, okay, that's cool. And it's so funny because I'm still friends with this woman. And honestly, she was one of the first people who commented on, a Facebook post. And I was like, I told you I was going to do this. It only took me 25 years or something.
That's so funny.
That's amazing.
You got to click send on some emails. I did it. I told you. Wrote that thing years ago.
It took me a while, but it's funny because I literally I did feel that calling, I mean, that was somewhere inside of me. But again, life has its own trajectory in terms of all the research. I think I said this to Melina and Bob one time, I had a lot of research to do. I had the idea, the inspiration, the calling was there, but you don't know how long it takes. And I've talked to other people about when they receive a manuscript, meaning it just downloads through them and it comes out. And even when you receive it in that form, you don't have any idea how long it takes from that to holding the book in your hand. You have no idea. I wrote that manuscript. I've written at least 7 manuscripts. And that manuscript I wrote when my daughter was, I think 2, maybe 2.5, and she just turned 9. And the book just came out. I mean, now I didn't spend that whole time marketing it. I only did that 2.5 years ago. But the point is that I wasn't ready. It wasn't ready. The world wasn't ready, whatever. I don't know. We don't know these things,
Right.
But so I had a lot of research to do. I had to go to law school and decide I didn't want to be an attorney. I had to go get my master's in counseling and then decide I didn't want to be a traditional counselor. And then I had to go learn energy work. And, I mean, it's there's been all of these things of really gathering. And,
super reassuring to hear as a creative, because I'm currently
It's the first thing
in
that came out of
state
your mouth.
Right?
I'm having.
I was like, wait, what?
I know what I'm working on, but it's not quite manifesting exactly as I keep changing it, and I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very relevant.
I mean,
Yeah.
even going off of that, Heather, I mean, looking back and seeing the road that the world and life took you through, I'm assuming you wouldn't change anything about it, but I'm going to ask anyways.
Oh, I love that question. Yeah, I mean, I think that, there's this quote from A Course in Miracles that's like, don't delay me in time. And it really, like, it's really, that's what came to me when you mentioned that, because I do feel that while I do feel that everything is on divine timing, I also do know that there are times when we sit and we tread our own water. You know what I mean? And we kind of just sit there I mean, I could use the metaphor of sort of like a little bit of paralyzing ourselves or treading water, or just like, like sitting, like looking, like going like this, like I don't really want to, no, not yet. Like that kind of thing where we just don't really, we're not really ready yet for whatever reason. But I think sometimes, and so I think, I like that message from A Course in Miracles is like, I don't want to delay myself. You know what I mean? And I feel that I have done that for sure, and I make sure that when I do the delaying, it's purposeful. I get a lot out of it. So, so even when I am delaying and whether I know it or I don't know it, I still think that it's rich and deep in its own way. So I think in some ways I wouldn't change things. I mean, because it's not up to me to change them. But I also think that, there's a part of me that's like, sure, I would have loved to have done this sooner. But the point is that I wasn't ready. So
that happened when it happened. Exactly. Yeah.
I can't ask for me to be anything other than what I am,
Yeah, of course. So glad you referenced the course, and so glad it's in your bio. I'm a huge fan. I've been reading it for a long time, and it talks a lot about, to continue that point just a little bit, because I want to jump into your book even more fully. But a little willingness is all you need. It's like it's not this Herculean effort, like the process of like self-actualization or liberation. You just have to come into that shift of willingness. And I think that's sounded to me like that's kind of what you're getting at, like that, removing any kind of hesitation to be willing, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily the creation of it, but the hesitation.
Yeah, I think that for the most part, we're all so scared of the concept of surrender. I mean, I know that I was, until I recognized and understood what it actually meant. Most people, and I say most people because, I don't know who we're talking about, but, like the majority of the people on the planet, when you talk about the word surrender, the image that they get, because I do, my world is in images, is like that, their hands up against the wall, like freeze, like that kind of, surrender, as in you're somehow caught,
guilty of something. Yes.
Guilty of something. And,
white flag.
Right. Like that sort of thing.
We're showing weakness.
Yes, for sure. Weakness. And
that ain't it.
And that is not the concept of surrender.
Opposite, really.
Right. Exactly. It's such a powerful thing when you can sit in the place of being willing to open to the possibilities of life calling and opening. And when you surrender to it being in that flow, right? You could call it, you could call it a million different things.
Ryan, the last like 2 minutes is like completely Ryan's whole like mission statement and like philosophy. I'm just laughing at him nodding his head.
He has it tattooed on his chest.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Pretty
Ryan, you can
much.
take it from here.
No, I appreciate that. That's why I chimed in, because surrender is a big part of my life. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of, it's true. I mean, surrender is viewed as weakness. I mean, to kind of the general public, I guess, you know. But in my spiritual practice, surrender has been completely the opposite. It is the most empowering thing I could possibly do for myself. And I find more strength and courage and and power in myself the more I choose to surrender. And when I say surrender, I guess for me, it's surrendering to, I guess the basic terms would be surrendering to a higher power or more divine plan, divine timing, you know, something that's bigger than yourself, and really trying to release control. That's the big part too. It's just trying to release control and surrender. So I really appreciate that.
Kind of, being an instrument and that intuitive quality. What's interesting, or the reason I was so captivated by Heather very quickly, was because we called her to ask her about like how to set up mindful sessions and curriculum for kids, and we just talked philosophically about everything for like an hour. There was no like, most people are like A to Z of like how to do this, and that's not what we talked about. We talked about intuitive qualities and, you know, being in the presence of. Sorry, Marina, go ahead.
No. I mean, I was just gonna like say, to even close the loop on this whole conversation that we're having is, it's almost to a sense of stepping out of your own way. And by getting out of your own way, it's that fear of surrendering, you know, and that fear of what would happen. And so to your point, like Bob and I were like, okay, there's got to be an A to Z. There's got to be a 1, 2, 3. All right, Heather, let's get on the phone with her. Let's ask. We had like notes on all these questions we're going to ask her. And she was like, hey. She was like, I feel it out. Listen, like, let's see how the kid, like, let's see what the energy is in the room. So she physically was, you're stepping in your own way, like, stop trying to control everything, feel it out. And what's crazy is what came about it is better than any kind of A to Z step Bob and I would have come up with, you know? So I'll leave it at that.
Totally. No, that's exactly true. Let me read a couple of these reviews about the book because they're so great. Quote, crying is like the rain is a timely gem. This simple and profound book does an exceptional job of helping people of all ages understand that our emotions don't need to be judged or shamed or shut down. Rather, if we just remember that it's all weather, we can allow the storms to come and go and celebrate the beauty that emerges as a result. This is an essential read for anyone interested in new ways of understanding child development, emotional well-being, and conscious parenting. Consider this a family primer for the evolution of humanity. Beautiful. That's like poetry, that review by Carrie Conti, PhD in human development specialist.
Yes, Carrie is an amazing woman, and her work is amazing. And she was actually the first person who taught me about the concept of feelings being like the weather. And so one day, you know, she did an amazing program called Evolve for parents and children. And we did it as a family. We were involved in it with, you know, hundreds of other families all over the globe for a number of years when my daughter was super small. And one of her things was feelings are like the weather. And it was a new concept for me. For me, when she said it, I was like, I'm not my feelings. And this was like, I was like already a counselor. I'm already like, I was like an old woman. I mean, like already, like I was like already, you know, like I was like teaching people shit. I mean, like seriously. So I was like, and I was like, oh my God, like it just was like, you know, it's like one of those things where you're not ready for the information until you're ready for the information. And that layer for me about feelings and, you know, was just like this profound thing. And so then one day when, you know, my daughter's super small and, you know, crying nonstop, my daughter came out, she didn't cry. And then, I don't know, at some point that night, she just started crying and she didn't stop for like, I don't even know how long. And she's, I mean, now she like doesn't cry ever, but she's amazing. But So there were a lot of tears, and I was watching everyone, how they were responding to my child's tears. And I was watching myself, because that's what I do. I watch, I see everything. When you're with me or around me, there is nothing that goes unnoticed by me. And part of that is like literally like trauma, hypervigilance. And part of it is just being a mystic and an intuitive observer of, and therapist and therapist of life. So there, there's all of that happening. But so I was watching everything, watching everyone. And just one day, I don't know, my daughter was crying. I don't know, I was crying, something happened, and it just like the manuscript just like felt like just whoosh. And I just like got up and started, like that
frantically.
Kind of thing. Yes. And then pieces would come in the evening. And so yeah, I love that review. That review touched me deeply.
Yeah, it's so great. I'm going to read one more.
Okay.
What a gift to humanity. Learning about and embracing our feelings as children would help prevent so many of the challenges we face as adults. Crying is like the rain should be required reading in all elementary classrooms, and for all parents, it would help create a kinder, more compassionate, loving, and joyful world. In fact, this book will speak to individuals of any age as they do the important work of emotional healing and reparenting themselves. Alicia Miller, founder of Core Emotional Healing. And that's the societal piece, which I think is so huge. And, one of the themes in this conversation, I think there's some troubling data about the younger generations, frankly. And, I think there's benefits to technology, and there's clearly not great things that have come from technology. There's the speed of information is useful in efficient ways, but it's also hyper stimuli, overwhelm and so on. And so it feels particularly key right now, these kinds of messages to kids, to be able to mitigate their own stimuli response in a world of just chaos, frankly. Just constant everything.
I mean, I think that in some ways for me, when you said that, about the data, like with the younger generations, what my mind immediately went to, and the older generations, because there's so much unlearning too from, like the grandparents right now, or the great grandparents of, the unlearning of, again, like just if we want to take the book concept of like what tears are about and who gets to cry and when and for how long and what it symbolizes and what it means. And, and then obviously not to mention all the other emotions like anger or even joy, right? How much joy are we actually allowed in our families, in our world, in our, it's an important question. You know what I mean? For ourselves, how much joy do we allow ourselves before the voice of shame starts coming in? Who are you to have all this joy? And so, it's like that, it's like that poem, that Marianne Williamson did, but then it was really, I feel like it was Nelson Mandela, it's like, who are you to not be, you know what I'm talking about, right? I'm going to like totally butcher it if I try to do the poem right now, but it's like, who are you to not be magnificent, wonderful? We're more scared of our brilliance than we are of our shadow, something like that. But anyway, so what I was saying was just that, so there's the unlearning of the generations ahead, as one piece of it. And then there's also the repair that's currently happening, because so much of the world that we've created and that we live in right now makes it so that we must have these tools and these resources in order for our kids, not to thrive, but to actually just survive, and actually just to get them just to right here. Because
We're already operating
they're-
from a negative
Well,
variable
I mean,
there.
and I don't, and it's not because I'm like a pessimist. I'm not at all. I mean, I'm
Right.
like not at all.
No, I think
it's
that's
more just the
opposite,
fact that like that's just what I
apparent.
see.
Yeah.
You know, what I see is the bombardment of everything you need is outside of you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, and the constant messages of that. And we've let it get so far that we now have had to create as a collective consciousness, this is just like my belief, a whole wave, a whole realm, a whole generations of beings coming onto this planet who are ultra sensitive, who have way higher needs than we ever did. And in order for us, hold on, I got distracted. There we go. In order for us to create the world that they demand.
Yeah.
And so and you guys have probably heard me talk about this before, but like everyone's like, why are all these kids on the spectrum? Why are all these kids highly sensitive? Why are all these kids coming in with all these things? And like, yes, there's like toxins in the water and in the bread and in the this. And then, I mean, we could go on and on. That's like a whole other Zach Bush topic, but like but there's an energetic component to it as well. And there is a, not just energetic, but like evolutionary component to how it is informing what it is that we must create. And so it's like, we don't create it, we're humans, right? So like we're a little, we have to, it takes us a while to really get, especially as a collective, to really get like what we really need to create.
Mhm.
So like, we're like, no, the polar ice caps are okay.
Right.
No,
we're pretty
like,
reactive.
It's right. Like it takes a long time to like, we're a little thick sometimes, you know what I mean? Like as a
There's
collective.
some Iron Age values still
Right.
lingering.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in order for us to really make the changes that we all need, right? Because we all need this book, but we have to be like, oh no, but our kids really need them because our kids can't survive without them. So anyway, that's
it's true.
Loved how you said that.
Yeah. It's funny too. I like when you use the word sensitive, describing younger generations, and like the first reaction you'll usually see, I don't know, from people or online is like that like they're overly sensitive. That's something we need to fix. And you're saying, and I love the way you said, like, no, we actually, because they have been lucky enough to become sensitive human beings. And like that's what I maybe what I love the most about that metaphor of the weather and your feelings is it removes this sense of like shame or guilt that I feel like everyone feels on some level, because like you said, it has been ingrained for so long that we need to be like hearing that message nonstop, because like it's going to take a lot to undo that, like that reaction of like shame of your own joy or your own sadness or your own anger, like, and it's like how to undo that. And like I also wish I had been working to undo that from an earlier age, but gotta start sometime. So
Totally. Today is better than any day. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, to add on to that too. Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
I was just going to say, I'd second kind of what Scott was saying too. One of my favorite parts about what I've heard so far is just the title. And it feels like it really normalizes crying. And I love that, that it's okay to cry.
Yeah.
It comes and goes. It's something that's going to happen, and it's not something to be afraid of or ashamed of. So I really enjoy that.
Totally. I'm a big crier. I own
me
it.
too.
It's true. I'm like very good with feeling touched emotionally.
And I agree with Scott too.
I'm shaming others when I'm crying. I'm going, you're not crying at this. This is moving.
As well, just like I feel that the younger generations are more sensitive, and I guess I kind of personally believe that as we evolve as humans spiritually, we are just going to continue to get more sensitive, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually really great. So I second what Scott was saying.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
just
just
definitely.
oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's
Jumping in.
definitely no, it's definitely a strength that I see to be sensitive. I remember, so Scott, like I just wanted to +3 what you and Ryan were saying. I've been like taking, even, I mean, I work at a corporate job, and we were doing our own teams, like strengths and weaknesses. And my biggest weakness was my sensitivity. And as a team, for the rest of the meeting, we discussed how being sensitive is actually strength.
Absolutely.
And how just how the website that we took the strength and weaknesses finder was even, it's been ingrained in us. So to Scott's point, it's like, we're going to have to say it 1,000 times for every one time we say something else about, or something about how sensitivity is bad.
Right.
It's just, I just wanted to agree with that point.
Yeah,
It's
It's hard to let it go. Yeah.
Yeah, what I was going to add too was that, I think I was talking about this episode to a friend earlier, and like just the idea of teaching meditation to kids, to someone that maybe, especially who's kind of outside of the traditions or outside of like contemplative practices, might not really get that as well. And like kind of what I was trying to explain was, kids are already naturally, like, they have this intuitive capacity and like imaginative quality and that's something that we've talked about a ton, is like it's the adults that have the blocks to being open to kind of, as you say, like, energetic hygiene and kind of some of the metaphysical stuff that we talk about on the show. We're a mystic philosophy, spiritual philosophy show, but but the kids get this stuff, and I think particularly you're doing, I think your framework and your apparatus in using the imagery is useful, and that kind of it's the doorway, it's their way into this stuff, but it's not very you're not just like giving them the knowledge of it as this like like it's a inventory of a good or something like that. Like you're just kind of opening up this quality that they have inherently as children, who aren't, maybe they're just like not bogged down by the world yet. They haven't learned those wrong kind of, that we're talking about, the kind of wrong values or mistaken
society hasn't trained them out of their sensitivity and their feelings yet,
I mean, I think what I would say
with this stuff,
I think for me, what I know about that is that they've had less time disconnected from spirit, right? So they remember their source more clearly.
Yep.
Because they were more recently there, and so much of the work, kids speak the language of energy, they speak the language of imagination, and that is what I have found is the best way to teach them anything, but also meditation. And it's also the best way for a lot of people who speak, who like have that inner child that is so alive in them, probably because it still needs that nurturance and that kind of holding. That's the best way for them to learn meditation, because what I teach is a lot of how I learned meditation. I was not able to, I wasn't at a place, even when I went through grad school and became a counselor and, started learning in those worlds, at a place to sitting myself down and kind of doing a more, I don't know, I want to say traditional, but that doesn't really even make sense, but just kind of like a more kind of like maybe stereotypical, it would be a probably better word, form of meditation, my meditation at that point was like dancing or going on a hike in the mountains, or, spending time listening to the wind through trees, or, like something like that. But it wasn't until I learned energy work that was through the lens of guided imagery and imagination, that is what hooked me. And so that's what I knew. And
Sure.
then when I had my child, that's what I wanted to start teaching her. And then I started realizing, wait a second, like other children can benefit from this as well. And so that's kind of how it grew from there. But
it really didn't grow at all from like this, like need to, I think we're talking a lot about like societal evolution, which is huge, and I'm all for that. But I love how your intention it really came organically, more so from your own experience and your own parenting, and then just realizing like there's an unfolding of it in your development with it and your work with it. That's very, I think, special, and the intention is just genuine, really pure, and that's so beautiful. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give a couple of examples, Heather, of kind of when you talk about energy work and like the visualization, particularly like the kinds of exercises that the kids do?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that I'm just sort of like sitting with what I want to share and how I want to begin. The most important thing for me when I start working with kids or with any of the work that I do is really sort of helping them to recognize that I see what they see. And so like that joining is such an important piece, whether you're teaching one-on-one or whether you're teaching into a large group, or whether whether I'm writing a meditation that someone's going to read to their kid, or whether I'm recording a meditation that, that someone's going to read, across or listen to across the globe to help their kid fall asleep, is that there's a relationship happening. And in that relationship, I am offering, I'm like putting my hand out and I'm saying, come check out what I see. And they're like, hey, I see that too. And then you're like, cool, let's look at it together. And then like, tell me what you feel when I say this, or tell me what and then there's like this playful exchange of like, that like, of embracing what we know is like this intangible thing that we want to make real. And using guided imagery and our imagination is the building block to what we call creation. Like if you think about it, I'm going off topic for a second, but I'll come back. If you think about anything you've ever wanted to create or did create, it started with an idea. It started with a dream, probably a vision, an image, right? In your mind or in your heart or in your wherever. And you put energy, you gave it energy, right? You spent time tending it. You spent time watering it, growing, doing all the things, right? And, you'd go to sleep at night and be imagining it and thinking it could go this way, and that's how we create an idea. And there are lots of different ways where people, whether it's the idea comes to you or you reach for it, whatever it is, but that your life is calling to you in that way. And that's how creation begins, with our imagination. So these tools that we're teaching children are not just important to help them meditate. They're important to help them learn how to create anything that they want to create, because that's how we create in the physical. The physical, I just think this is so important. So I really like saying,
no, please.
The physical is the last piece of creation. People always assume that it's like, oh, this, like, oh, here it is. See what I did? But it's like, this was the last step. This was the final thing. This didn't feel like anything, right? Like this was, now that it's here, it doesn't feel any different than it did when I wasn't holding this. You know what I mean? Because this was the last step. I did all the work 7 years ago, and then 5 years ago, and then 4 years ago, and then, I mean, did I do that backwards? Anyway, and then 1 year ago, and then, like
Totally.
the creation and all of that birthing energy, right? That the physical is the last step. So when we're working with kids with using their imaginations, we're helping them to understand how they connect inside, how they listen to themselves, to all the parts of themselves. There are so many parts of ourselves, and there's also a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise out there. And the more that we can help our children and ourselves to hear clearly with our own inner discernment to what's noise, what's voice, what's fear, what's love, what's knowing, what's heart, what's, on and on.
Yeah.
The more that
quieting.
we train. It's like I say to my daughter, we have to train our brain, right? I mean, we're trained, and I only use brain because it rhymes with train, but I don't, it's not a brain thing. It's not actually brain,
Right.
but you know what I mean? Like it works for like, for kids, whatever. So
it works for me.
Right. I mean, like, it's like, we have to train the way that we respond.
100%.
And when we, so this work helps them to understand and connect to that imagination. It helps create that inner discipline, right? Of understanding. And when I say discipline, you all know, I know I'm speaking to the choir here when I say, you all know discipline comes from the word disciple, right? It is not like, whoosh, that is not discipline. There's no discipline, right? This is not like smacking your hands with a ruler. Discipline comes from the word disciple. It means to teach. So people got that all messed up.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
So anyway, okay. So one of my the most important thing. So some of my favorite things to work with for kids is to start let me just start with this. There's so many doors. I'm like literally like chomping at the bit. Can you guys feel me? I'm like, I'm overflowing with things to say. So there's so many doors, right?
I'm so glad
to like enter into the, like, so depending upon what child I'm talking to and how old they are and how much time I have and what the situation is and what they're going through and what's happening, all of those things. There's so many ways to work in this way. Some of my favorite games, and we're always playing games. I always like to call them games because everybody likes to play games.
Games are fun.
So one of my favorite games to play is a grounding game. And so that I call Tails. And it really involves that creating the energetic and imaginary at the same time creation of feeling grounded in your body and coming into your body. And it's the first thing. It's a great game. Being
so
grounded,
great.
being grounded.
We're familiar.
Yes. Being grounded and feeling grounded can also work with just holding your kids' hands with your kids' feet with your hands. That is super grounding. Touching the bottoms of their feet. And then using any metaphor that you want to start helping them to bring the energy down their body, right? But I don't normally use the feet as much because really what we're doing is grounding down into our root. So if we want to start getting into energetic anatomy, into our first chakra. So that area of being held is really important. So using our tails, we create tails from our roots and we grow a tail. Literally I start with being like, okay, you've seen a tail. Where if you had a tail, where would your tail be? And everybody knows where their tail would be because Everybody knows that, right? And then they're good. They know, right? So we're sitting and we start growing our tails. And we don't have to have our eyes closed. We don't have to be in any special position. You can do it when you're standing up. It doesn't matter. This doesn't have to be, this isn't a rubric. Like this doesn't have to be a specific way. So, and you can do it with a 6-month-old, and you can do it with a 16-year-old, and you can do it with a 60-year-old, and maybe not 600 because we're not there yet, but whatever. So, so you create and you start growing your tail, and you see your tail, and then you see what color your tail is and what kind of tail it is. And you grow it down through the layers of the earth into the center of the earth. And you find the center of the earth and you plug it in, and you figure out a way to connect to the center of the earth that your tail would naturally. So like if I have a whale tail, then it's going to like swoop in and like hold this little area of like the water in the center of the earth because I'm a whale. Or if I'm you guys get the idea.
The tail's up to the participant.
Exactly.
No forced tail creation.
Exactly. The tail is all what they want. So I've never ever met anyone, adult or child, who when I'm like, you want to play the tail game, doesn't know immediately what kind of tail they are with.
So true. That's beautiful. Thank you for that example and for your contextual explanation too.
I loved it.
Yeah.
No, I loved all of it. I loved all of it.
I could just listen to you talk for like hours of this. What I was going to say earlier, I don't know if this plays, but why not? Nikola Tesla, when you were talking about imagination, he was this inventor. You all know who he is. And that he talked a lot about the imagination and how he would envision his inventions at an extreme level of detail in his mind before creating it. And that was when you were describing that, I just couldn't help but think of his kind of hyper focus on the imagination creation component and the physical coming later, but beautiful and super important. And I think what you're doing from an educator perspective is getting these kids to become aware of the psychological layers to themselves, and they're aware. You're cultivating their awareness through these techniques, and the image of the tail is so even when you said grab the earth's crust, like that's such a powerful kind of beat in the visualization, because you're growing it, and then then it hits impact, and you kind of it's tangible throughout the process. So it's beautiful work, and I'm so glad we got a live example. There's many more.
Absolutely.
I want to say one more thing about that, because you reminded me of something that I haven't said, which I think is really important to go back just for a second about what we were talking about kids.
Please.
Spending less time having been disconnected from spirit. And so much of their connection to their wisdom, their knowing, just like their innate sort of ability and capacity to be, is present. And so in my work, the idea is that I want to give them tools and opportunities and experiences to make this conscious, to make what they already do without really kind of thinking, make it a conscious practice. Because it is my belief, and it is my experience, and it is my something that if we don't do that, life happens.
Yeah.
The stumbles happen, and they forget.
That creative power dilutes.
I know that because I have a mirror.
right. I've gone through the lessening power myself.
and I've met every other adult that I've met.
Yeah.
And I know what happens. We shut down. We close this door. We close that door. That's not safe anymore. that's not accepted in this group, that's not allowed over here, that's, you know, that's not cool, whatever. I mean, you know, there's like a million things.
Yeah.
And in order for us to belong, you know, and this is more of like a kind of maybe a philosophical kind of thing, but in order for us to belong, and this is like a developmental, like an energetically developmental process, in order for us to belong, we have the message that we have to give up, have to orphan parts of ourselves, parts of our authenticity and our authentic expression. I couldn't decide which one I wanted to say, so I tried to say them together. And I don't want, I want to do whatever I can to share with the kids that I work with, and with as many kids as will hear me, and with as many parents that will hear me, and with as many teachers as will hear me, and as with as many, I don't know, counselors and people that, you know, coaches, everybody, you know, that will hear me, that I don't want children to have to choose between themselves and belonging. You know what I mean?
Beautiful.
So I think that's an important piece too, because there are so many people who, even some of my closest friends, who are like, like, aren't kids already super intuitive? Like, don't kids already like, aren't kids already super connected to themselves? They already know like how to like, you know, like they intuitively just like, they're like, I want this thing, you know, they know what's for them, you know? And obviously recognizing that like so many adults are like, I don't know, I don't, you know, I've lost that kind of thing, you know? And it's like, well, yeah, but what happened? Right? What was the breakdown? And so when I looked at that from like a counselor, you know, as a counselor, as a mother, as a person who, you know, experienced life, and just as a mystic, or as a, I don't know, person who thinks and sees, I was like, I think there's something to this. I think we need to make these practices tangible and concrete and so much a part of their lived experience that they don't ever for a moment think, I wouldn't ever let go of that part of myself. That is my connection. That is my connection to source. I would never. I don't care who you are or why you want me to give this up, but I will never. It is a part of me, and it's so much a part of me that you can leave, but it ain't leaving. You know, like whatever, you know.
You're validating their imaginative, like they're at a fork in the road. Imaginative, intuitive, or culture
cattle
programs. You know, cattle basically. You know, self-doubt really too is what it is. Self-doubt or imaginative.
Right.
A lot of this reminds me of a couple of things. One is a quote from A Course in Miracles, which you quoted earlier, but remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. And that's really what I was envisioning when you were kind of describing that too, is, you know, children are just so innocent and pure and sweet. And we have experiences that just cause kind of layers of trauma, small and big. As we get older, and it's just layering on top of and on top of. And what you were talking about also reminds me of something that our conversation with Jennifer Miller a few weeks ago. So a lot of the work that she deals with is all of our trauma is related to, at some point, big or small, a point where our power was taken away. And that is very similar to what you're describing as, you know, kind of losing a piece of myself. Or giving up my source. And so, there's just some things that came to mind.
That's beautiful.
Well said.
It's a great, connection.
I love the, like you said, even some of your friends were like, well, aren't kids already so incredibly intuitive? And it's like, you're elevating it from like the subconscious to the conscious, which kind of gives the, like, it's like they still have, like you said, it wasn't that long ago that they were, you know, connected completely to spirit, and it's like washing off of all of us as we get older, and like you're giving them like this kind of, I don't know,
connector.
In my mind, I'm thinking of a spacesuit because I love sci-fi. So like something that holds that with you, you know, so that it doesn't, you don't lose it all. In fact, you retain it instead of it washing off like it does for everyone else. But
I mean, yeah, that's a great way to put it. I say this every time, Heather, but your work is so important. And I will say it again on this episode. If I knew the work and the concepts that you're teaching to kids now when I was a child, I'm curious how much more emotionally developed and how much earlier I would have, and how many things I almost would have learned. I mean, everything's on divine timing, and I totally agree with you in that, but I can't help but think about that. And if anything, that just motivates me more to kind of work in the same path as you in, you know, spreading this to the younger generations. And I think you kind of hit it on the head. It's my own personal child that I'm also healing at the same time as you know, giving it to others. But I did just want to double click on the fact that your work is just so important, and I'm so thankful that we got to have you on this episode, just to even listen more about you and just spread your good work. And we are all so proud of you and happy for you that you just, you know, the book launch, and I could just talk forever. I don't know, I'm just very much in awe of you.
You're so right.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here to all the above. My last couple of questions were really, one, we have like a formulaic question for the podcast, because this format of conversations, that's how people do that. But before we get to that, I was just gonna say, as far as like for educators, and I mean, I think parents also, but one thing that you said, I think just even more practically, veering into the practical from the philosophical, you know, how do we get this stuff in schools? How do we get, you know, what are some of the barriers perhaps from kind of an adult viewpoint that might block this, that we can help kind of get around to get this material in front of the kids?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have an answer, but I'll speak to it.
I wish everybody said that anytime they ask a question. I really don't know, but I'll speak to it and we'll see if the answer comes up. Say that at a conference call with clients.
It's kind of a big question, so it's a fair response.
That's true. There is a renaissance. I mean, before you jump in, I mean, I think the Mindful Schools, which is associated with the Human Kindness Foundation, and the Richard Davidson people, and you know, the whole kind of mindfulness movements. There's sub kind of scenes within the mindfulness movement that are education focused, and that are, you know, there's kind of a corporate wing, and there's kind of a you know, secularization of yoga and Buddhism aspect, and then there's a for the kids aspect. So that we're not alone, I think, as conscious creators and educators in the space, but it's still not the mainstream. It's obscurity.
Totally. And so, yes, that's where I wanted to start, was that there is so much that's happening, and there are so many people that are doing amazing work. And whenever I hear of someone, you know, working in the field, which is like, when I say the field, it's like, you know, this big broad thing, I'm like, bravo, you know, like, yay, yes, another,
it's
like,
not
we
competitive.
It's right. Like, we need all the people who are doing all the things, and it's all, you know, fantastic. And with the, you know, there's like the mindfulness kind of component pieces. And then along with that, there's like the social emotional learning. And so in my mind, like those two kinds of things within schools, kind of within a more secular for sure, but within a more mainstream kind of way to bring in, we're bringing in more. We're bringing in more to our children. And under like sort of the guise of social emotional learning or mindfulness, there are so many things that you can bring in based on the school and the teacher and the, you know, the atmosphere and the day and the, you know, all of those things. There can be so much that's that's kind of happening. And for a long time, so I think that that's all fabulous. And I think that the more people that are able to see the possibilities, bring in the practices, it's not just what's happening for the children. You guys have heard me say this a lot. Like, this isn't something that we do to your children, this is something that we're sharing with kids, we're sharing with families, we're sharing with teachers, we're sharing with communities. I mean, this is something that we don't teach to children, but we do with them. So again, teachers and parents, like, this isn't fix the children school. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is, we have to
enable the children to come into their
right. Yeah. This is all of us saying, I am available. I'm willing to go back to our initial thing. I'm willing to step into a new way of being. I'm willing to step into another way of seeing, right? And of being with myself and therefore with the kids. Like, it all starts with our internal relationship. And that's really all that we're doing, is modeling for that for children. Like I said before, I'm like, check out what I see. Like, check out how I do this. Like, check out how it makes me feel. And they're like, oh, I want some of that. And I'm like,
you're in the
and I'm like, you have it. What?
I was just going to say, you're in the practice with them. You're grounding yourself.
Always.
You were so clear about that with us. Like, you have to come from that space and that presence in your dealings with the kids. I mean, you probably are so much of a contemplative where you're grounding yourself before you're talking to the parents and the school boards, and because your presence is part of everything that you're doing.
Right. Once you learn how to use a grounding cord, then the motto is you never leave home without one. That's it. You never leave home without a grounding cord.
I feel pretty blown around here and there, so
never leave home without
it's
a grounding
useful
cord.
Information.
But I think that I think that there are a lot of awesome things happening in schools and in mainstream. And I think that a lot of parents are waking up and recognizing that they want to create something different for their families. They want to create a different kind of family than what they lived in.
Yeah.
And so I guess my point, what I'm trying to say, is that there are so many inroads and to how this work can reach people, I guess, is kind of what I want to say, because like one of the women in my writing group, she brought the book to her maybe 10-year-old daughter, and she asked her, and her daughter loved it. And she asked her, who do you think, what age kids, or who do you think this book would be best for? And she goes, I think that all the mommies who are pregnant should read this book. Like, before they before they have a baby. And I was like, yeah, that's a really good idea. Like, get it on every baby registry. You know what I mean? Because it's like, because it's like, because the point is, like, people always say, like, you can get a license to drive a car, but you don't have to have a license to have a baby. It's far more dangerous, like, and so, I mean, right. And so, to me, like, we don't do enough reconciling of what it is. And some people do. Some people are super introspective about it, and they're like, I know for sure that I want to do it this way, or I want to do it that way. But then when it comes into that moment in time, when you've got this little thing in front of you, and all of a sudden your insides are upside down and inside out, and you react from that place of what was done to you.
Yeah, sure.
Then you need help. We all need that, we need reminders. So I think, to me, there are lots of different ways and lots of different opportunities to bring this, the messages that I speak to, what you guys are doing, Bob and Melina, like there's so much that's needed. And it's all about remembering. It's about remembering our truth and remembering our power and remembering our wholeness and remembering who we are and why we're here. So yeah.
Love it.
Can't say it better than that. Thank you so much, Heather. Last question is favorite books and teachers. Maybe somebody who you haven't, who are popular or obscure.
Yeah, you know, I sat with this because you had mentioned it to me and I was like, this is harder for me than my background. And and
you don't like my template-y questions.
No, I love all of it. It's challenging for me because, well, I'll be just brutally honest with you. What's challenging for me is that because I've been such a sensitive, empathic person, I take on other people's energy and truths really easily. I did when I was a kid and as a teenager and as a young adult. So I became very weary of allowing anyone's information too far in because I would lose myself too quickly. And all of a sudden their truth would be my truth. And then I would have a hard time discerning, you know, between,
totally.
Wait, like, well, who had that thought? You know?
Totally.
Yeah, I feel that too.
I just repeat Yogananda all the time.
So I think that there have been so many teachers, you know, so many books that I've read that were created such an imprint on me. I mean, I was like the teenager who like would like go into Barnes and Noble and like get books on like Freud and his relationship with women. And I would like be like devouring it in like, I don't know. I like, just like, that was just weird, but like, so I've always loved and explore. I always love exploring people, how they express themselves. So to me, like, I love reading. It's such an important part of my development and of my work. But I think what I wanted to do was just share like some of the books that are sitting on my bedside table right now, because I think maybe that's like something. So right now, because I started my PhD and I'm really getting involved in spiritual direction. And it's really informing all of my work, and it's so beautiful. And I'm reading a lot of books right now that are like, I'm reading Sharon Salzberg. A lot of her books on her book on faith is on my nightstand right now.
Wow.
And like 3 of her other books that I thought were interesting.
The Loving Kindness Queen.
Yes. And
she's amazing.
I'm loving, there's a book called Dreaming Me, which is a really fascinating book by Jan Willis, which is, and she's a professor of Buddhist studies at, I believe, Wesleyan. And in she's going to speak in the upcoming, you guys probably like the Dalai Lama conference that start like the sounds, does it sound true?
Yeah.
Sounds true. Yeah. And I think Lions Roar.
Yeah. And Lions Roar, they're all coming together. So she's speaking in that as well. She's on the thing for that. Amazing. So, but I didn't know about her until I read this book, Dreaming Me, that I just finished. That was a really powerful book. And it's really about her journey as an interspiritual and interfaith being. So I'm really intrigued right now because I'm learning so much about what it means to be interspiritual. And that it's something that I've always lived in, but didn't have words for or understand. Which is like a whole other podcast, but that would be a really
whole nother episode. But I would love to cover that.
That would be
religion, boy.
Yeah, that would be so fun to talk about because there's so much that's in for. It's so juicy and so rich. Yeah. But and then I also have Mirabai Starr on my nightstand, and she is an amazing teacher. And I have a couple of her books on my
she's
nightstand.
She's a Ram Dass sis. Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. And what other one was I going to share? Oh, and I have The Wisdom of Listening by Mark Brady, I believe, on my nightstand. And that book is a bunch of different people who talk about listening, and in so many different ways. And that's a really, really profound and rich topic. And it's really, to me, it's like, you know, the layers of just swirling back to these pieces. You know, it's just, the layers are profound. Right now, I think on this planet, there's the opportunity for such depth and expansion, depth and expansion at the same time. And so, you know,
beautiful. Those are great recs.
Yeah, we need like that web to feel. I just had this sort of this vision of like this web, you know, going out, that's connecting us with all of the teachers, and, you know, that have been, that are, that, you know, that like that we're all holding each other and kind of gathering together and creating this foundation so that we can launch into this next phase of our consciousness and of our planetary, you know, time. So
you're here.
That was such a beautiful imagery. I'm like visualizing this completely. That was beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you.
It was so lovely. Heather, you are just a gift. It's been such a wonderful summer to get to know you and learn more about your work.
Likewise.
And I hope 1 billion people buy this book. And
that sounds like a good number.
That seems maybe high, but I'm gonna write a review and read it to my baby, and I'm just gonna be tuned in to everything that you put out. So I
want to read it to my kid that I tutor too.
Yeah.
Yes.
So even though I don't got a kid, I've been working with a kid for years, and I know he could use it too. So I'm going to try to find a way to incorporate. So thank you.
Scott, I'm reading it to my sister, and she's 27. So I don't think that age matters.
Great. I'll read it to my mom next week too.
I'm kidding, but I'm not really.
Where is the best place for our listeners to buy your book, Heather?
Good question.
Anywhere. That's a great question. Honestly, anywhere that books are sold. There, it should be right now because of COVID. I think that bookstores it's harder to find, you know, books on the shelves, because I think, you know, people were stopping kind of buying and inundating. But anywhere online, whether it's Amazon, if that's your whatever. There's a woman-owned bookstore called Book Woman in Austin. That's a great place for people to support. But anywhere that any local bookstores that you want to support, they can always order it. It's, you know, it's on Target.com, it's on Walmart.com, which totally fascinates me, and fascinates and I don't even know what word to use for that. But yeah,
we'll make use of their infrastructure.
That's right. Totally. No, of course. Totally. I just was like, it's where? It's on what?
Very efficient ways.
Hey, someone went there to get like tires or like groceries, and they're gonna have a very different life after they find that instead. So that's like the perfect spot for it.
If it actually gets to the shelves in a Walmart, that would be amazing. That would be super cool. I would love that. But yeah, anywhere. And my website, the website mindfulkidscommunity.org is also that has a link to Amazon and a link to Root and Star, which is the magazine that people can still buy copies of and follow the Ami's adventures. And that's going to be hopefully up online soon. And then the latest thing is that should be up pretty soon in the next few weeks on mindful.org. A new series is starting. So
exciting.
That'll be good. So yeah.
Amazing.
Congrats on everything. The book is Crying is Like the Rain. It's Heather Hawk Feinberg. So enjoyed speaking to you. Best of luck with everything. We will continue to bug you with questions and guidance.
Oh yeah.
Advice.
You're stuck with us.
Yeah,
Good.
basically.
I love it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.